Thank you for participating in this great day and all these different events we've been involved with. Our next activity is the leadership panel. There are faculty members from all 5 schools here for representing, and we took the questions that you guys had, and we have a few to kind of start things off, and then we'll ask you, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll have microphones going around. So we have Dean Escalier, the Dean of College of Nursing, Dr. La Rosa, the Interim Dean of the School of Public Health, Dr. Lewis, the Dean of Chirp, Dr. Lucchese, Interim Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Sachter, Distinguished Professor in representing the School of Graduate Studies and College of Medicine, and Dr. Sass, the Vice Dean of Education for the College of Medicine. And Dr. Putman will moderate and take over from here.
So there are a number of questions that we took, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one and then to start it off. And then if you all have questions, we'll take them from the audience. If you don't, I'll ask more of the ones that are that have been submitted. So, and just for this first one, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to answer. But for all of the other questions, we'll ask them to pick one person amongst themselves to answer. So I'd like each one of you to start by answering the question. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, one leadership lesson to your younger self, what would it be? Do you want to start? Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Lori Escalier. And I kind of cheated. Can you hear me? I have an outside voice. And I kind of cheated a little bit because I have more than one pearl of wisdom, but don't worry, I'll be quick. My first pearl of wisdom is to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. I could probably phrase that better by saying, surround yourself with people that you will learn from. There are so many people here at Downstate that you can learn from. You learn best from each other. You can learn from the faculty, from the staff, from clinicians. So surround yourself with people that you can learn from. The second pearl of wisdom that I'd like to offer you is to reflect daily. The greatest philosophers of all time said something very simplistic, and that is, you will learn about your inner self if you reflect every day. So before you go to bed at night, reflect on the decisions that you've made every day and how your decisions impacted the organization, others, and academic success even. So I think it's really, really important, and I tell my students all the time, reflect daily. The third thing that I wanted to talk with you about is leadership. Begin your leadership early, and you're all doing that. Because here you are on this beautiful Saturday in a leadership seminar, so you're doing that. All of us know about the traditional characteristics of leadership, the textbook characteristics of leadership. Willing to take a risk, trustworthiness, honesty, and all those other things. But there are some things that I coin the uncharacteristics of leadership. And those characteristics are compassion, kindness, empathy, and gratitude. Those characteristics will take you far on your individual leadership journeys. The last thing I wanted to say was be happy. Be happy. And there are 4 keys to happiness. The first one is purpose. Now, you all have a purpose. You all have a really big purpose. You're here at Downstate and you're studying. And that's a really, really big commitment and a purpose. The next key to happiness is engagement. Become engaged. There are so many opportunities here in Downstate for you to become engaged. Take advantage of them. You will remember your engagement for the rest of your careers. The next key to success is resilience. Don't take it all too seriously, and don't be too hard on yourself. People who are really hard on themselves get stuck in a rut. That's very, very difficult, very difficult to get out of. So be flexible, be resilient. And the last key is kindness. And I really do feel that kindness speaks for itself. So I hope that was helpful. I hope they were pearls of wisdom that you'll remember throughout your careers here.
I was trying to think back to my former self and to when I was your age. And I think the thing that I would say to myself is to trust your intuition, to really listen to that voice that's inside of you, because it won't steer you wrong. And to not, and if you, sometimes you hear that voice and you hear something that's sort of aversive or you want to avoid, the temptation, and I know that when I was younger I would do this, is sort of avoid it. But oftentimes there's really a kernel of something there that's very important. And so I would tell my younger self to really, to listen to that voice and to honor it. And if you have that lodestar, whatever decisions you make are going to turn out okay. Because you can make a decision and maybe in hindsight it's not the best decision, but if you listened to your intuition, that decision plays out in a way that eventually leads to good things. So that's what I would say to all you future leaders.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alan Lewis, Dean of Chirp. And as I thought about this question was challenging for me for two reasons. One, I don't do a lot of thinking back to things I would have done differently in my career. I kind of, try to make my best judgments going forward. And the other thing is, I actually, as part of my training, leadership was a big part of my formal PhD training. So I had some good guidance sort of along the way. But what I probably would do differently is really try to think about making sure that I was a servant leader. And what I mean by servant leader is making sure that you never ask anybody to do anything that you're not already doing or haven't done recently. So that's really the whole idea of making sure that you walk the talk or walk the walk, and don't just say things, but be a model of doing things that you're asking folks to do. Because leadership is not just about being in a position where you have a formal leadership charge, but it's really much more about wherever you're working, whatever your role is, being a person of influence, being a person who has integrity, being a person who actually is somebody that people want to emulate and model. And so I think that I would tell my younger self to really think much more about being a servant leader. And also beyond that, I would probably think about a style of leadership that I want to try to emulate. Now, I did have some formal training in styles of leadership. I particularly see myself as being more akin to being a transformational leader, which is a leader who has vision, a leader who actually relies on the followership, the people that they're trying to lead, and respects them in a lot of ways. So the second piece of advice would be to actually make sure you find a leadership style that actually suits who you think you are. So you have to do some introspection and try to figure out, who you are and how that lines up with a particular style of leadership. And then the other thing is to really don't underestimate the value of your network. When I think back over the course of my career, many of the opportunities that I've been able to avail myself of have been much more a function of timing and knowing people. So it's okay to have an opportunity that presents itself and you're able to take advantage of it based on being in the right place at the right time and actually having a network of colleagues that allows you to sort of take advantage of it, because you've still got to deliver and perform once you're in that role. But it's much more about, I think, who you know and your network a lot of times, because there are a lot of competent people out, and not everybody gets those breaks that they're looking for. And so the more you can be intentional about developing your professional network and making sure that you have people that you emulate and that mentor you and that you can mentor as well, the more likely you are to be able to have those opportunities present themselves and more doors that are open. Because it's all about options. For me, I was always clear that I didn't know exactly at any point in my career exactly what I wanted to do or what the next step would necessarily be, But at each vantage point, when I would pause and think about my career progression, I wanted to make sure that I had more than one option at each point along the way. Each point along my career path, I wanted to have more than one option. And so in order to do that, you got to have that network. You got to really be a person who walks the walk or walks the talk in terms of how you see yourself as a leader. And so with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Lucchese. I'm the chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine here at SUNY Downstate. I'm also the chief medical officer of the hospital. And my most recent new job is the interim dean of the College of Medicine. So I always knew that I wanted to be a leader, and I always, I kind of questioned whether I had, the fortitude, the intelligence to do that, but nobody ever worked harder than I did in my career. So if I had to go back and tell myself, to give myself some advice, I probably would tell myself to be patient. Because I wasn't very patient. I thought it should happen overnight, and I thought that, I'm the most qualified. I should be doing this, and that kind of got to me a little bit. So I think that if you're patient and you just know that it's not about the battle, you could lose a battle, you could lose more than one battle as long as you win the war. Okay, and I'm just going to leave you with one quote of a great, great leader. Admiral Halsey. Admiral Halsey was the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military fleet in World War II. And after the war was over and all the ships were in the Pacific, and he gave sort of a little speech, and they broadcasted it around to all the troops. And his words were, "People call me a great man. There are no such thing as great men. There are just great challenges which ordinary men are forced by circumstance to meet." So keep that in mind. You're not born a great leader. You develop into a great leader. It takes some skills, it takes some learning, and it might take you a little while to get there. So just keep doing it, and you will. And the last thing I do want to say is, a true leader is always mentoring their successor. So that's extremely important. If something happened to Mike Lucchese tomorrow, my department would be fine because I have some really good leaders that I've been mentoring for a while. So keep those points in mind.
Hi, I'm Judy Lee Rose, and I'm the interim dean of the School of Public Health. My colleagues have given you great wisdom and understanding. I'm going to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. There are 3 things I would tell you: patience, persistence, and understanding. If you have more questions, I'll talk to you later.
Hi, I'm Todd Sachter. I'm a professor, I'm a neurologist, and I'm also a professor in physiology and pharmacology, and also anesthesiology. And I do basic research as well as being trained as a neurologist. And so this advice is particularly for those going into as physician scientists or scientists, those going into an academic career. So the advice is as you go from your medical or PhD or studies into your postgraduate studies, what you have to do is to find your brand. So what that means is you have to find the question that people talk about passion, but the passion is a consequence of your curiosity into that question. It has to be a question that is you are so curious about that you could sustain research to try to understand that topic, not just for 1 or 2 years, but for a decade, for 2 decades, for 3 decades. Now the question will, of course, change as science, goes forward, but you have to have that brand, that one question that you really care about. And there's some practical, in addition to the sort of the psychological aspects of it, of how you keep yourself going every day, there's some practical aspects. So the fundamental gold standard of academic research in the medical institution are grants, NIH grants in particular. If you don't get those grants, you cannot follow your curiosity. So yeah, people are obsessed about grants but it's because they have to do what is driving them. They have to have the resources. So so it's a huge advantage if you have a brand when you're applying for a grant. And that's because, you know, fashions come and go in science and in medical research. But if you're the one person in the world who's the world's expert, or pretty close to the world's expert on that topic, in addition to whether it's sort of trendy or not, research, the people reviewing that grant will have to ask, do I want, if I don't fund this grant, do I want to cut off the fount of research on that topic? And very few people actually are going to say, no, this whole topic is uninteresting. So it's an extra plus if you are identified with your brand. And that's opposed to many other researchers who go from topic to topic, flitting around like, you know, butterflies to, and it's very hard for them to sustain a research effort. That's kind of why they flit around, because they're not associated with the actual topic. Whether the topic will be as important as you hoped, well, you don't know. That's why it's research. You don't know what the future is. But that's my piece of advice.
I have questions, but does anyone have a question they want to start with? Oh.
Dr. O'Reilly spoke a bit earlier about the importance of networking in order to get access to opportunities and research, and resources. And I'm sort of a bit curious, how do we go about finding or identifying the individuals who will give us access to the networks or opportunities we're looking for specifically for our goals?
Can I do that?
Yep, go ahead.
I have actually a little story about that. So Dr. Riley, he said he was like the, you know, extreme extrovert, right? So I'm probably on the opposite side. I mean, although I'm talking fluently now, I'm actually pretty close to an extreme introvert, for those who know me. But I also network, okay? But my style is sort of different. It's far more passive. So here's a little story. So I work on memory, okay? So my research is on that topic. That's my passion. That's my curiosity. That's my brand. So as Dr. Riley said, you go to meetings. So I went to this meeting, and he had a big paper on how you could erase long-term memory. We were the first group to understand how memories are stored, and therefore to show how they could be erased. So I was at this meeting, and I got an award simply, because of the paper, which was a big paper in the Journal of Science, which is a big journal. And the award came a couple years later, as people kind of understood its consequences. And so I got an award, and then after the award, you have to go to this party. And just like Dr. Riley said, I'm an introvert, so I am on the periphery. I am like, I don't know any of these muckamucks, right? Okay, I don't talk to them, I'm just, I just want this to be kind of over. But the president of the society, this is the Society for Neuroscience, a reporter for the New York Times asked the society president, what's hot? Because he wanted to have an article on what's hot in neuroscience. That wanted to be his beat at the Times. And so the president of the society said, "Oh, you go talk to that guy in the corner." That was me. So actually, an intermediary person came over to me and dragged me over to meet the reporter. So I'm talking to the reporter. He says, so what are you doing? And I explained to him, just like I told you, we discovered, how memories are stored and how they can be erased, and that's it. And he didn't seem very interested. And a very brief conversation, and I went back to my chicken fingers. So that was in November. So in December, like a month later, never heard from the guy, I get an email saying, I want to do, from the reporter at the Times, saying, I want to do an article on your research. And so we started talking and emailing, and he visited Downstate, visited the 6th floor. And then he said, well, I have my network at the New York Times, and they owe me a front page story. So I want to put yours on the front page. And then eventually, well, like he wasn't sure because he was able to swing it, but he did, and it was on the front page of the New York Times in a good way, which is, not so, that's really, it's hard enough to be on the New York Times front page as anyway, but to do it for a good reason, it's even harder. Anyway, so I kept in touch with this reporter. We meet every year. We have drinks, just the two of us. And around 3 years later, after this, I asked him, so what was it that got you interested in having an article on my research? And he said, oh, well, at that party that we met each other, when you started talking to me, it's like you were very sort of almost blasé about it. You were like very quiet about the research. And he said, that really struck me, because when people try to, when scientists try to talk to someone in the science section of the Times, they're trying to sell their research, and we get very wary of that. We think we're being sold a story, but it wasn't that way with you. You were, it was like, and that made him think that this was like the real deal. So the point is, even super introverts like me, you still go to the parties. You just do it you still network, but you just do it in a different way.
Can I chime in, Jeffrey?
Yes.
That's it.
Great story there. So I would say start with the assets right around you. So you all have classmates that are your colleagues, right? Dr. Raleigh uses that term colleagues quite a lot. They're your colleagues, and they will be your future colleagues in your respective disciplines. So start with building that network, because anybody that you know as a classmate, then in theory you also know who they know. And start with your professors, people who are teaching you, the faculty around you, and your mentors. So start with the community that's right around you and begin to build those relationships, those alliances, that rapport with those individuals. And over time, it'll mushroom multifactorially, and you'll actually have a much bigger network than you expect you will, but than you might have expected you would have. So just kind of go with the people right around you and build out from there. And the key is to, as my dad used to tell me years ago, don't burn any bridges. Always recognize that whoever you're interacting with may be somebody that you may need for whatever reason later on. And so just make sure you keep those relationships positive and start right around you, with the assets right in your backyard, so to speak.
Yep.
Do all of you have a mentor in your life? I'm not talking about an academic advisor. I'm talking about an important person that brings out the best in you. Who is it in your life that when you're with, you feel like you can do anything? Identify that key person. Who is it that perhaps piques your interest, or when you're around, you forget about time and space and everything else? And then the onus of the responsibility is on you to ask that person to mentor you. Okay? I am asked all the time from students, will you mentor me? And I say, yes, I would love to mentor you. I mentor nursing students, medical students, students in the other health professions. And it's important to have somebody that's not tied to your academic performance, that you can truly be yourself when you're around. I would recommend that to each and every one of you. But you have to know when that mentoring relationship is over for whatever reason. You know, so you have to be on it and with it all the time. And when it's over, seek out another mentor. Okay, I still have there are two people in my life that are my mentors. She's very elderly now, and she's been my mentor, my confidant, my friend. She's a retired dean from UC Berkeley. And I call her anytime I have a problem. I think it's important for your career advancement and development to seek out a mentor and do it sooner than later.
I would also add one other thing, and then we'll go on to another question. But LinkedIn, Dr. Riley did bring up LinkedIn when he did his presentation, and I think LinkedIn actually works very well for this. I always tell people whom I'm mentoring that if someone comes and gives a presentation to your class, it's absolutely okay to connect with them on LinkedIn. Make sure you don't just send the "I want to connect with you" message, right? You want to put, "Oh, you gave a presentation to my class on Monday. You know, I'd like to connect with you," and then it sets up your whole network for you, right? It's all there. So 10 years later, when you're applying for a job at a particular hospital and that person happens to work there, you go on LinkedIn and put in the name of the hospital and it comes up, these people are connected to you. It's okay to then reach out to them and say, "I'm applying for this job. Can you tell me anything about it?" That's a passive way of asking them to help you without saying, "Can you help me get the job?" Right? And so most people are comfortable saying that. And if they can't help you, they'll tell you they can't help you. And if they can help you, even if it's just making a phone call to say, you know, "Look at Tommy's resume," sometimes that's all you need is help opening that door. You have to go through the door, but the network helps you open that door. And I think LinkedIn helps you do that without the other problems that other social networks come with, right? Because it's a business connection network, and so you can feel comfortable contacting people, and most people will accept your they don't call it friends, but the connection request. Especially if you put on there, you know, you presented to our class last week, or I met you at this event, or whatever it is. So use LinkedIn for that. That's what it's there for.
And Jeffrey, can I say one thing? I know we got to move on. But in terms of mentors, you'll have lots of mentors over the course of your career probably, and be selective. The most important mentors, I would say, are those who really want you to go beyond what they've been able to do. I know whenever I mentor somebody, I always tell them, it's like having a kid. I've got kids, grown kids, and it's like having a kid. Your mentees, my goal for my mentee is to actually have opportunities that I didn't have. If my mentee doesn't do better in his or her career than I've done, I feel like I failed as a mentor. So not all mentors have that approach. Keep that in mind. Some mentors will mentor you to a point, but when you get to the point where they think that you are approaching where they are professionally, then they may get a little nervous. So that you can have a mentor like that, but recognize that. The best mentor is the one who wants you to do better than they've done, and they're committed to that. And that's the person you really want to have as your true lifelong mentor. Sorry.
Another question? There? Anyone? Oh.
Good afternoon. So earlier today we did the Myers-Briggs test, and we all figured out where we sat along the scale of 16 things. So at what point in developing a team do you factor in the personality types of the applicants or of your pool?
So I'll start with that. I'm an INFJ, which means I really have to flex a lot, actually, in when I do leadership stuff. So I think that anytime you're working with a group of people, you may not have the formal designations of, it depends on what model you use, if it's Myers-Briggs or if it's a different model. Having an appreciation for, in whatever group you are, with people's different styles and being aware of the group dynamic. And there's lots of good background reading on how to build good teams. And so I would suggest looking at that, very basic literature about working in teams, because within a team, the best teams are very diverse. And so you've got a diversity of styles, and you've got a diversity of approaches and a diversity of backgrounds. So within a team, knowing who's in your team and what the differences are, and allowing for a group process to allow everybody to express themselves, I think is sort of just a generic approach to really building good relationships and getting the richest work out of a group. But there's lots of really good basic readings you can do that help you figure out how to bring a team forward. There's also a really nice technique you can do where you debrief after meetings. So you can just ask the group, what did we decide to do today? What went well? What didn't go so well? How can we do better next time? And sometimes just a brief check-in can be very helpful to sort of figure out how to get the group to its highest functioning.
So I think in my career I've done Myers-Briggs 3 times. I know I did it for my master's. I did it for another leadership course. I don't know if I scored the same on each time. I don't remember. Probably within a month, I probably forgot what I was, in what category I was in. So, for me, it's a gestalt. It's a feeling I have when I meet somebody. I talk about quite often great leaders, right? So the Pittsburgh Steelers were this great football team, and they were winning time year after year after year, and these upstart Dallas Cowboys came in one year, and I was actually a senior in Boston College. I remember watching it on TV. And Dallas was supposed to beat them, or Pittsburgh destroyed them. And they were interviewing the Pittsburgh Steelers coach, Chuck Noll, afterward. And they said to him, Chuck, how do you do it? You're such a great leader, but your defensive end, was a defensive lineman in college. And Mel Blount, your defensive back, was a halfback in college. How do you do that? How did you do that? How did you pick the team? How did you do that? He said, well, I give somebody the ball and let them run with the ball. I give somebody the ball, I throw them the ball. I let them tackle somebody who's running with the ball. When their eyes light up and they love it, I put them in that position. And I said to myself way back then in 1979, if I'm ever in a position to lead people, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give them multiple opportunities, but I'm going to task them with the thing they really love to do and they're really passionate about it. And I've been extremely successful. I don't look for a researcher in my department. I don't look for a stellar educator. I don't look for the greatest clinician or the greatest administrator. But I give them tremendous opportunities, and I draft the best athletes. So when you're picking your team, that's what you need to do. You need to pick your team, the people who are the most talented, and give them plenty of opportunity, and they'll just run with the ball.
Other questions? Yep.
Hi. So public speaking is an issue that I particularly struggle with, but it's also a skill that's necessary for leaders. So I was wondering if you had any advice on how to be an effective public speaker.
I'm going to talk to you about being a public speaker. I have been giving lectures for many years, and they can bore the living, breathing hell out of you. Now, do you guys want me to go on for the next 2 hours about something that will really bore you? No, you don't. So one of the things I do when I give talks is I get up and I give the talk and I walk around, because you can't go to sleep while I'm walking around, okay? And I think that's very important. And again, short, sweet, and to the point. Don't go on 20 minutes, half an hour, max. After that, yeah. But when I'm walking around and talking to you, it's a little hard to not pay attention. So it's scary to get up and walk around. It's scary to give a talk, but give it to a couple of people who are going to tell you what they think really about your talk, and then give it.
That's it. That's great, Judy. the only point I wanted to add also is to really know your audience and know what you want to happen. At the end of that talk, what do you want the result to be? And if you really think about that and your audience, it'll allow you to sort of develop some creative ways to approach it that feel natural to you, but that will also engage your audience.
But you don't always know your audience, unfortunately. You know, you have to go give a talk at the American Heart Association, and you kind of, sort of, but not really.
I would suggest that you start small. I was always the same way. I wasn't a very good public speaker. It's probably because of my very heavy Brooklyn accent, and I've been all over, and people know that I'm from Brooklyn as soon as I open my mouth. But I think you start small. You start with your own peers, a little group, and then you get bigger and bigger and bigger as you get more comfortable. And I think that's what and you have to. It's unfortunate. It's part of the job description for being a leader. There are people who have a lot of fear in speaking in front of large crowds, nowadays there's things like videotaping and redoing them and writing and everything else. So don't let that distract you. But I think you have to force yourself and start small and then get bigger.
I think the other thing on that too is when you give a talk. I mean, I've given thousands of talks. Thousands, maybe that's a little too much. A lot of talks to large groups of people. And I'll tell you something. I take the pulse about 2 minutes before I'm about to, and zoom, it's taking off. So I have never given a talk and not been nervous and scared and not knowing what's going to happen. But press forward. You
have to make yourself do it. And
Yeah.
it's a continuous improvement process. Even people who are established good public speakers are constantly trying to get better. You know, critiquing themselves, figuring out how they do it better, looking at other people who are great speakers, you know, taking tips from them. And you have to make yourself do it. Set your goal and work on it. And only evaluate yourself against whatever your goal is. You know, don't worry about how good of a speaker President Riley is. Think about what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go with your own career and your speaking skills.
And I can pass something along that I learned in a public speaking class that I took at NYU, and that is picture your audience in their underwear. Kind of takes the edge off.
And
I've often asked, I get very nervous before talks, and I often ask, I feel, oh, this one went really well, this talk was really terrible, I was just really nervous. And I ask, colleagues in the audience, I just say, oh, honestly, how was it? And there seemed to be almost no relationship between how I thought I did and how the audience perceived it, which I thought was very interesting. And basically, it almost always goes well. And so it doesn't help that much, but since it almost, in fact, always goes well, that what I try to do is like a minute or 2 minutes before the talk, I say to myself, well, it always goes well. So just have fun. Try to have fun. And it sort of worked, but yeah, I'm still pretty nervous now.
the other thing is to remember that when you're doing your networking, if this is a skill that you want to develop, ask those mentors, how do I get that practice? One way is there's lots and lots of conferences to go to. And all of those conferences accept presentation proposals from people who want to present on something. So propose something and go and give a talk. And yes, the first time you'll be looking at your paper the whole time. But by the third time, you won't need to look at the paper anymore. But the only way to do it is, as Dr. Lewis said, going out and practice. And your mentors can help you. Or ask to present with somebody, so it's not just you standing up in the front. Can I be a co-presenter? And someone will let you do a part of their presentation, and that's fine. But those are the kinds of things you ask your network. Help me get that kind of practice.
And once you see that even if you think you didn't do a good job, it still is fine, then you kind of get over that. And I know when I started, I used to make myself start with small little tasks. Like I'd be in a class, I'd say, okay, so today, Alan, you're going to ask at least 3 questions, or you're going to make 4 observations today to make sure that I put myself out. And that, even though it's not a formal presentation or speech, but it makes you put yourself out a little bit within a setting with peers. And then you begin to realize that, okay, I did that. The world didn't come to an end. And quite frankly, an hour afterwards, nobody even remembers what you said. And even with presentations, a lot of times. So it's not like it's, some major situation where if you don't, if you're not the greatest speaker in the world, that they're going to condemn you and throw spitballs at you or whatever. It just isn't that kind of a situation. And you got to kind of come to realize that. So.
Another question?
Hi. Sometimes being in a position of leadership, you may find yourself at a crossroads in making decisions that maybe not support the majority, but maybe the minority, just to help them overcome a situation. So how do you, in positions of leadership, assess whether or not you made an adequate decision when you hear from an opposition, more or less? How do you navigate through that?
Okay, Patricia, can you restate? I mean, I kind of heard what you said, but I'm not entirely sure what you're getting at. So if you can.
I'm just going to give an example, a personal example. I'm class president of my class, and there are times we had to make decisions as to whether or not, let's say the class felt prepared for an exam, and maybe I've had to propose to my faculty, is there any way we can shift this exam back maybe a day or two because, out of maybe 45 students, let's say 18 to 20 don't feel prepared, and I would hate for those individuals to possibly fail an exam. And maybe the majority feels that they just would rather keep the exam on the same day. But you feel that it's such a, maybe it's a small class, there's only one exam, and, it would be detrimental to leave this exam on said day when so many people don't feel prepared. So maybe sometimes you're in a position where you say, maybe I'll ask to have this exam moved because maybe 20 versus the 25 really need help. And those 25 people may be so against you. It's not a good feeling. We're all in positions of leadership, but we're all still individuals at the end of the day. So how do you deal with coming to a decision, sometimes having to override maybe or make an executive decision?
Okay. So for me, a couple things. First, it depends on your leadership style. And so some people are democratic leaders, and that means they try to go with whatever the majority view is. I am what I consider to be a leader who likes input, but it's not always a democracy. So I don't always go with sort of the dominant viewpoint. But I do want to hear all points of view and all stakeholders, give them a chance to say what they want. So depending on your style, so if you're a democratic leader, then you have to you feel obligated to go with that majority viewpoint. So what I would do in a situation like that, if you don't have a particular style, is still try to build consensus. So it's not so much 20 versus 25 and the 20 want it and 25 don't. Just try to build that consensus and try to be transparent about your decision. What I found in making decisions as a leader, people sometimes don't like your decision, but people are much more likely to buy into it and understand your decision if they feel like they had a chance, first of all, to voice their opinion, and second of all, if they understand the reasons why you made the decision the way that you did. So if it's a transparent process, then people, even if they don't agree with the decision, will respect you for having made that decision. So it's not a perfect answer, but I think you kind of got to feel your way through it a little bit.
We have time for one more.
I actually had a two-part question, if that's okay.
That's okay.
One is like family-related, one is more work-related. So the first one being, we had a seminar about time management, and I'm actually married with two kids, who are oldest being 2.5, and so I'm kind of torn from the family life and the academic life, and so how do you balance your life in your respective professions and your careers with your families? And the second question being transitional government. I'm also a transitional president of the NSC, and so I was just wondering if there were if there was any advice as to how to best transition a government from one year to another.
I can answer the first part of the question. I think there's nothing more important than your outside life, your family life, your significant other, your kids. Nothing more important than that. And the minute that your professional life starts to interfere with that, that's a problem, and you need to address that, because we all know what divorce rates are, and we all know how people don't get along. it's much, much higher for healthcare professionals than any other area. And that's probably why, because we're all like that type A personality and we really just trudge along. So as far as I'm concerned, your family life, if that's good and solid, then when you come to work, you have a clear head and you could do really what you have to do. So that's what I would comment on that. In terms of, you know, a transitional leader, you know, transition is great and disruption is great. And if it's necessary, then you have to do it. You have to plot your course. You have to really think about what you need to do. You have to find consensus. And then you have to transition so that the organization is better positioned. We in University Hospital now have tremendous decisions to make. You know, are we going to be a community hospital? Are we going to be a, you know, a transplant heart center? You know, are we going to get out of this or get out of this? It's very difficult, but those decisions have to be made because that's what viability and survivability is all about, is making those really tough transitional decisions. But you have to invest the time and to make sure that you're doing, and then you make the decision and you go with it. You know, decisions are like anything else. The more you do them, the easier they are to make. So you have to just make those decisions. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is that there are a bunch of interims, you noticed up here, and interims or transitional leaders are a great opportunity for you to learn, test the waters. Typically, there are two different types of interim leaders. One is given the job to do a particular task, but most of the time, you know, they're not expecting you to be the leader. They're expecting you to be a placeholder and hold an organization together until a new leader is brought in. And I've been an interim almost everything in student affairs throughout my career, and we've got two right here who are interim. And I think it's a great opportunity. If you're offered that kind of opportunity, you should take it because it's great practice towards the future. But when you're that interim leader, sometimes it's tough because they're like, oh, you're just the interim. I'm not going to pay attention to you, you know, because I'm going to just wait for the new person to be hired. You have to be confident enough in your own ability to take the leadership reins and make things happen. Am I get that right? Okay. So I would like to thank our panel. I know we kind of ran out of time, but thank you all very much for giving a leadership lesson. So you're up, right?
Really quickly.
Oh.
We just want to thank you, Dr. Putman, for committing your time, for your support, and for serving as a moderator. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So thank you all for your participation. Did you learn anything? Hopefully. Took some notes and you're able to incorporate things into your leadership styles. And so that's what we plan to do for today is to impart some wisdom in you, to empower you as leaders to be able to take these things in your organizations. So in closing, I just want to acknowledge some of our very important people. So I want to acknowledge our panelists. So let's give our panelists a wonderful hand. So Dr. Lucchese, Dr. Lori, how you doing? Thank you. I mean, Susan, Dr. Lori's over there. I'm sorry. We're both nurses. I'm getting confused. So we want to acknowledge everyone for their contributions. In the interest of time, I won't go through and embarrass you all and call you out, but I know that you all made wonderful, wonderful contributions. So we're very, very appreciative of your time on a Saturday. So thank you. You all look so sharp. I want to take notes from how you dress. Thank you. And so last, I want to introduce Ms. Cheryl Korn, who did your time. Come on up, Ms. Korn. So I wanted to present Mrs. Korn with a plaque that indicated for her wonderful contribution to the time management workshop. Oh, I'm ripping it off. There we go. So you can see. So thank you for your efforts and your energy. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know the students mentioned it. You got a shout out. So thank you for your time management. Thank you. And last, I want to introduce the committee. So this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conference would not be successful without the committee members. So please come up. Abby, please come up, please. And grab it. As he comes, Abby spent tireless time emailing and coordinating, and so I just want to show my appreciation. Oh, I'm dropping it. show my appreciation to you, sir, just by acknowledging your contributions. So thank you. Michelle, come on up, Michelle. President, Michelle, give her president a voice here. Y'all not excited about your president? So Michelle is a fearless leader also in making sure that the food and everything is coordinated. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Where's TJ? TJ's around? TJ, come on up here, TJ. Man, TJ was just behind the scenes doing everything, and I couldn't ask for more. TJ was just great. So thank you, TJ, for your contribution. Thank you. Justin, come on up, Justin. Don't shake your head, man. Come on up. You see this wonderful background? Justin was responsible for helping get it up and bright and shining. So thank you, Justin. I'm going to give you the box, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. I can't open it. Dr. Medea, come on up, Dr. Medea. Can I say Dr. Medea? Can I just say Medea? Okay, Doctor. Thank you.
I just want to thank my mom and my dad.
She told me she was going to do that. Adam, come on up here, Adam. You see these wonderful t-shirts? Everybody look down at your t-shirt. Adam was, you see the design? That was Adam. Adam did the design, wonderful design. Where's Andrew? Come on up here, Andrew. Andrew, come on up here. Andrew stole my jacket, so I had to get another one, but he looked sharp. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew was on our committee with the students, and he was able to keep things going, keep me on track, and I just appreciate everything you did. So thank you, man. And then last but not least, Meg. Come on up here, Meg. Meg was our fearless leader. Meg kept me on track and kept all parts of me on track and all other parts of me on track. So Meg was just responsible for, thank you, Meg. We appreciate you. And so lastly, I just want to thank you all for giving up your Saturday and committing to improving as leaders and learners, because we're all going to be lifelong learners. So we just thank you for this contribution. Have a good rest of your day. All right? Thank you. All right? That concludes, what, I missed something? Oh, that's right. I almost forgot. Thank you. See, that's why the committee is so important. Lastly but not least, please log on right now and do your eval so that you can evaluate all of the wonderful opportunities so that when we do this again next year, we'll have ideas as to how to improve. Also, Abby's going to send out any PowerPoints from the presentations today and any notes and highlights that we've gathered from the panel. And in addition to highlights, will be up at some point on a video program will be available to all of you. All right, so please fill out the evaluations. Be honest, and we'll receive your feedback.
How about a round of applause for Seth, who jumped in and coordinated a workshop last minute?